Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Solar Opposites. Okay, so this episode is a kind of about this kind of episode kind of addresses the fact that the Solar Opposites kind of have a habit of blasting people with their sci-fi stuff and just causing problems for everybody. And also there's a thing in the wall that explains some things regarding what's going on with the mosquito population down in the lower depths of the walls. And I will get to that, but I'm actually going to start with the B plot today because that's what the episode decides to prioritize first. And I'll get to the A plot later. But in case, the episode opens up where the previous one left off at the wall, where Cherie and her group wind up getting attacked by a giant mosquito, and it's at this point where Halk, Cherie and the map person, the finance person, they wind up trying to free from the mosquito, and at one point the mosquito spits on Halk and covers him in saliva, and also winds up stabbing the woman because she can't keep up with Halk and Cherie, and it winds up sucking her dry. And eventually it corners them, and the mosquito is about to grab them, and Cherie is just barely able to fend off the mosquito. But then the janitor from the very first season shows up. The very first person who was in the wall, he shows up, shoots the mosquito, and tells them to come with him if they want a larva, which of course confuses the hell out of them because they don't understand the pun he's trying to make. But he then just tells them to come with him, even though Halk is hesitant, and he even points that out. But Cherie points out that that's probably fine because it's the janitor. He's the first person who has ever shrunken down inside the wall. He's probably cool. But he then proceeds to lead them to the prisons, where he then proceeds to explain the whole issue with the mosquito population down the wall. And he then proceeds to go on to explain how the mosquitoes have actually been kind of growing a lot and have actually been attacking people down the wall. But and it's actually been just growing rampant, and of course Cherie asks him how they're supposed to stop the mosquitoes, since is pointing out that they could be anywhere, and he even points out that there's actually a couple underneath her feet, which he immediately stomps on. But of course he also then proceeds to point out that actually there is no stopping the mosquito population from going rampant, and he then brings them inside his cell to inside what is now his home because the prisons have since been converted into a makeshift living space, and he then proceeds to show them why. And he then brings them inside and starts dicing up a mosquito grub, and then proceeds to reveal that actually there's a very good reason why they can't kill the mosquitoes. He's been making jerky out of them. He's been cutting them up and slicing them up into pieces, been making jerky out of them, and then offers them pieces of it, some of it, which both Halk and Cherie are hesitant on trying it, but then Halk eventually eats a piece and decides that's actually pretty good. It's at this point where the janitor explains why he believes that the mosquitoes are actually essential to their survival within the wall, and why they need to coexist with them. As he points out, because the mosquitoes are inside the wall with them, they can use them for an endless food supply as long as they're kept safe and used as ranch animals. And of course, he also proceeds to point out that he has been doing it for quite a while, and nobody's been able to tell the difference. And he does point out that obviously, since resources are finite, because the aliens only ever send in candy and a couple of other things, he points out that it'll actually break their dependence on the candy that is sent inside the wall, and that they can eventually just break free of the aliens' influence entirely and grow and continue to just continue to grow their population without necessarily a food source. They now have a renewable food source, which of course Halk points out is actually kind of brilliant. While Cherie is a little bit more hesitant, but then she does try a piece and decides to do a thing, and eventually the two do go to sleep. Halk goes to bed, and but when he wakes up, he discovers that the janitor is actually tied up, and when he looks over, he discovers that the janitor is in fact tied up, and he explains that Cherie was the one who tied him up, and she's currently going off on a mission on her own. And Halk immediately goes to go confront her, telling her that she shouldn't have done that because obviously they're his guest. she shouldn't have just tied him up and imprisoned him. But she then points out that she had no choice, and points out that she needs to deal with the mosquito population because they're a threat. And of course, this causes Halk to wonder what exactly is going on. And of course he wonders why she would even do something like this and why she would risk her life. But she points out that obviously he's the one, but that obviously she wants to protect her daughter, and that she will exterminate every threat to her regardless of whether or not of what happens. And Halk, it is at this point where Halk finally decides that he wants to bow out, pointing out that that's obviously going off on her own to just kill a bunch of mosquitoes is a problem. She shouldn't be doing that on her own. And of course, he also points out that for those reasons, he's now bowing out. But which Cherie calls him out on, pointing out that they're supposed to be partners and that he's supposed to be a hero. But he points out first and foremost, he never wanted to be a hero. That was just a role that was kind of thrust upon him. But also, he then proceeds to point out that actually his wife is his partner, and that he needs to go be with her rather than helping Cherie risk her life. And does tell Cherie that she should consider doing the same before she makes Pesley an orphan, and then proceeds to walk off. At which point she does point out that she's not really going to listen to Halk. And then proceeds to eat the jerky, pointing out that this is obviously every last thing, and that's every last one. And although Halk does have a point in that regardless of how many threats she exterminates, there will always be another threat, and she's not going to just be able to keep them all safe indefinitely. That eventually she's just going to get herself killed. And but in any case, she then proceeds to pack up all the things she needs, including a lighter full of fluid that she wanted to. I believe she either brought with her or grabbed at one point, but of course, the janitor then proceeds to tell her that she needs to be a lot careful because this is exactly the kind of thing that she's seen every time somebody's gone to power. That's every time that's always been the Duke, and then Tim, and seemingly now Cherie. And Cherie tells them that she's nothing like Tim or the Duke, and also that the janitor doesn't know the Duke the way she knows him. And but he does point out that obviously it's always somebody, but that regardless, it's always someone trying to lie and cover their own ass. And of course, and Cherie points out that she's not worried about that because she's killed all the liars. But he does point out that if she still strongly believes that, then she doesn't know who's actually lying to her. At which point she knocks him out. He just takes another bite of mosquito jerky, which she admits she is making it a lot harder because it's actually pretty damn good. And then proceeds to go and fight mosquito grubs, which quickly becomes a problem because there's too many of her for her to handle at one point, and one of them eventually gets around her throat and starts choking her to death. At which point Halk comes out of nowhere and immediately rescues her, apparently having decided that if she is going to go off and do this thing, that he's not going to let her do it alone. But it quickly becomes apparent that there's too many of them, and that that's causing a problem. So at which point Halk remembers that Cherie has a lighter, and they decide to use the fluid in that to actually drive off the mosquitoes. So they create a circle around a given space in the area that is seemingly a bit of a hard area for them to stand on. And then they proceed to set the lighter fluid on fire with a match, and this causes all the mosquitoes to die. But of course Halk then points out that they make a great team. But then they hear a cracking noise, which they start looking around wondering what the hell it is, and Halk eventually realizes that the floor underneath them is giving way, and then they go into a hole, and that's where the episode and the B plot ends. But now to get to the A plot of the episode, which is that apparently we see a young woman who is racing through the town. And it quickly becomes apparent that something weird is happening to her because she's very stretchy and very gummy. But she does start running through the town and eventually gets back to the solar opposite's house. And it's revealed that that's actually Jessie in a human suit. And of course they wonder why she took the suit out for a pilot drive. But it's at this point where she reveals that actually she was undercover and she learned something. So she was actually doing a journalism piece, which Corvo doesn't really care about. So at which point she found out that Parade magazine was going to vote them one of the 10 best towns to live. And of course, and of course this is the point where Corvo kind of rolls his eyes a little bit because he doesn't care about that. But then she reveals that they've actually have been skipped over for being put in the group photo, which of course annoys Corvo, Terry, and Yummy to no end. And of course they're obviously very angry about the fact that they've been skipped over, pointing out that obviously they're probably the nicest people in town. And then proceeds to point out that not only are they very helpful, that they also established that with Nanobot Man back when they tried to run for town council and mayor. But of course, it's at this point where Jessie points out all the times they've actually caused problems for people. Notably, that they've for some reason been framed and put on the wall, which confuses them a little bit. Of course, there's the time there where they turned people into wine, of course, but then also the time where they shot the Red Goobler's fiance and turned her into a rat. And of course, Corvo also admits that he doesn't know who framed those. But also that apparently Yermalak is apparently the town's quote unquote moral center, and he offered them his own personal bat signal, which as it turns out they don't ever actually use. They just strung a big thick sheet over it and never use it. But of course, at this point where Jessie does point out that obviously they need to actually, if they don't believe her, that they need to go outside and see for themselves. So they do go do that, and seemingly they think everything is normal. But in case in point, they've got they see the guy that is obviously they see the male guy who comes to their house and offers and interestingly, he's not walking up to them and handing them their mail like he would normally do with a normal house. He has a t-shirt cannon and fires the mail with them, and it's also implied that the previous guy got shot with a ray gun at some point, and proceeds to run off and tells them not to do that to him. And of course, it's at this point where they note that that's actually a very strange thing for him to say. But then Corvo quickly notices that there's a bit of a pattern that's not just the mailman. Everybody avoids them. There's a group of guys who move over to the other side of the house, to the other side of the street, so that they don't have to walk past the solar opposite's house. They note that the planes don't fly over their house and in fact go a full circle. The pupil only ever has away play dates, which is weird. And but then the final straw for at least for Terry is that they don't get to have Grubhub delivered directly to their house. Apparently the guy will make deliveries to every house except theirs, and they have to go pick it up from the Grubhub HQ, which of course is finally the last straw, and they quickly realize that Jessie is right, and they need to figure out how to not be jerks and how to actually get the town to like them. At which point Jessie decides that they actually should do a thing, and that he brings them up to a set inside the ship where they go into sensitivity training, and Terry implies that he had feelings for the guy who actually ran their sensitivity training thing that they were there for, and it is at this point where Jessie reveals that what her plan is, that since she's the only person in the group with quote unquote empathy, she points out that she's going to teach all the other people in the solar opposites to have empathy as well, and to actually kind of simulate the idea that they're going to have their sci-fi tech but also not use it. She gives them all paintball guns, and Yamalak expends his immediately and shoots her, and tells her to get him more paintballs, which isn't the best start for them. But in any case, she then proceeds to bring all three of them on their own separate trials, and these are all trials that are designed to cater to each of the solar opposites specifically. Jessie and the pupa are the ones running it, which means Corvo, Terry, and Yumilak are put through a simulation. And for Corvo's test, he has to listen to a guy tell him what's going on with his car. And of course Yumilak points out that he knows more about the car than the guy does. But of course Jessie merely tells him to let the cutout finish. And though he really wants to shoot the guy, he does decide to hold off on it. And the guy does continue to tell, and the cutout does continue to tell him everything that's wrong with his car. Until the guy tells him that it's going to be $300, at which point Corvo completely loses it. Similarly, Terry is put into a carpool with a couple of sports fans, which Terry points out he's not going to be particularly bothered by because he's very much a fan of every sports team. And does point out that she can fire up the single, and that he has to be in a carpool with them. And of course it's at this point where the simulation starts up. But what we find out is that it's not them talking about sports. It's about them talking. It's about the cardouts talking about a movie that Terry hasn't seen. And Terry does not handle spoilers a lot well. So naturally, he eventually, and specifically it's a Fast and the Furious 10, which is funny, and it is most likely going to happen, being perfectly honest, because Fast and the Furious, it's just going to continue making films until infinity. So, yeah, Fast and the Furious is one of those franchises that is just successful. But and of course, they're just going to continue churning out films. I would like to say it's predictable, but it makes sense. If anything has ever made money in a thing, it makes perfect sense that it would make more. Here's the point, they've apparently made, 10 Rocky films? When there were five of them? They made a standalone one, then they made 3. There's 8 films in the Rocky franchise, and close to 9, probably 10. But I looked it up at one point. That's so, yeah, if it's just word of warning, if a franchise winds up being successful, expect them to make more of it. Yeah, in case Terry eventually loses his shit. But going back to Terry, he eventually loses his shit about Fast and the Furious 10 and shoots up the car. Which of course annoys Jessie, and then it gets to Yumulak, who's given a very simple task, quote unquote, where he merely has to sit down and order from the menu. And of course, Yumulak does start out the test pretty tamely. He just orders a grilled cheese, but then the waiter cutout then proceeds to list all the various cheeses that they can order, and Yumulak winds up shooting him, which Jessie questions why he did that, and he immediately responds that he shot him because apparently cheddar was not in the top 10, and Yumulak likes cheddar, which or rather American, which of course causes Jessie to finally become upset, and she then proceeds to round up the rest of the solar opposites and tell them that they failed their test rather miserably. But of course, they point out that they're not really concerned about the whole empathy test that they've taken, and then they decide to devise another way to actually get into the parade thing. Into the group shot for Parade magazine, and eventually decide that they're going to create a ray that turns people into various things, and that they're just going to photobomb the place. And finally, Jessie decides that she's not going to deal with their problems, and it then invokes the Schlorpian right of banishment, which according to Terry and Corvo, they can only do once. They're only allowed to do so one time in their whole lifetime, and then never again. But of course, Jessie points out that they need to learn empathy, and the only way they're going to do that is by being banished for a year. Which she then proceeds to lock them in a giant TV room booth with a bunch of monitors on every wall and scene and floor. And Aisha is the one to run it, and she tells them that they're going to be locked in there for a year, or until they learn empathy, which Yumulak surmises is most likely going to be a year. At which point they start playing a bunch of clips that are designed to invoke empathy in them, and of course, including several movies like Scrooge and a couple of other ones where empathy is the main theme. And this causes them to become upset. And start crying and sobbing because they don't want to be locked in the room with all these things. But Jessie merely sips a tea and congratulates herself on a job well done, pointing out that now that her family's out of the way, that everybody is free to be their best selves. Meanwhile, at which point, case in point, a guy is currently walking his dog outside. And it winds up veering over to the solar opposite's house, much to his fear, and it winds up shitting on the lawn. And he tries to scoop up the poop, at which point Jessie comes out to collect their mail, and of course the guy is very upset. The guy is very scared because he thinks she's going to rat him out to Corvo, but she immediately tells him that Corvo has been dealt with, and that her family isn't going to be a problem anymore. Then collects their mail, tells them to have a nice day, and then goes back inside. At which point things go off the rails because the guy, as it turns out, is a huge jerk. And he proceeds to go off to tell several of his friends that now that the solar opposites that have been locked up, and because they can no longer turn people into things, they are now free to be who they're allowed to be, and that they can now go off to be jerks again. And sure enough, these 3 guys then proceed to go off to loudly blare the music. and this winds up causing a huge domino effect throughout the town, where everybody winds up turning into a jerk, or rather is already a jerk and is implied to have been putting on a fake facade because they were afraid that the solar opposites would turn them into jerks at any given moment. And as it turns out, there's in fact one guy in the entire town who built a system that was supposed to actually find all the jerks in the town, but since he's never actually gotten a chance to use it, and also since he's designed the town to he's designed it to actually track people and jerks in the town, and that's they're obviously being voted for best city. He's obviously realizes he's not going to use it, and he asks his colleague to pull the plug, but then one of the people in the town turns into a jerk, and he quickly notices the domino effect. So he immediately schedules a meeting with the mayor and tells him that it's going to multiply in a matter of minutes, and that within an hour the entire town is going to be flooded with jerks. But the mayor apparently is revealed to actually have been a secret jerk all along, and then proceeds to remark that he now knows what he's going to do, and he's going to go sleep with his mistress in his own bed, and leaves. And of course the guy realizes that now that since the mayor is not going to be of any help, he points out it's only up to him and his colleague. But then his colleague tells him that she's actually a jerk as well, and then proceeds to leave, telling him that he's on his own. At which point he quickly realizes it's going to be a problem. Meanwhile, and it's even more so when he realizes that Parade Magazine have arrived and are about to enter the town. And it's at this point where Jessie goes out to sneak around in the human suit again, and quickly discovers all the carnage that she's endured. As she turns out, she looks around, and then asks one of the guys what's going on, one of the guys rampaging through the streets what's going on, and he merely tells them that because the solar opposites have been locked up, everybody is free to be themselves, which just means that everybody's allowed to be a jerk. And he then tells them that he was actually turned into a lizard at one point, but now he's just free to be whoever he wants to be, and then proceeds to go off and do jerk things. At which point Jessie, realizing her mistake, realizes now that her family was actually the solution and not the problem, and then proceeds to go back to the house to let them out. Also, the pupa is notably can't handle any of it and curls into a ball to get away from all of it. So, yeah, unfortunately, the pupa is unable to actually cope with what's going on around him. At which point, Jessie then proceeds to go back to Aisha and she goes up to the top of she proceeds to go up to the top of the town hall, and the guy running the jerks tracking system tries to tell her about what's going on, but she merely tells him to can it, and eventually the suit just gets, her human suit just gets so damaged that she winds up taking it off and just throwing it down the stairs, and proceeds to turn on Yummy Like's bat signal, and quickly realizes there's a reason why the town never used it. As it turns out, it's just him taking a piss on the bat signal, which of course Jessie scolds him for using that for that silhouette. But of course, they use this silhouette to get in contact with Yumulak, who realizes now that who was told by Aisha that he has a message, and he sees the symbol, but and realizing the town needs their moral center. But he points out he then asks Aisha to let them out, but Aisha tells them that they haven't learned their lesson yet. At which point Jessie appears on all the monitors and tells them that she was wrong, and she realizes now that the solar opposites were actually the people keeping everything in check and everything in order, and then proceeds to tell them that they need to actually come out and actually deal with the situation. But of course Aisha points out that she doesn't think they're ready, so she devises one final test for Terry, Yumulak, and Corvo to actually finish, to prove that they have in fact learned empathy. And what they do is that she actually ordered a pizza, and the pizza guy's 2 hours late. Which of course annoys the solar opposites and wonders why he took so long. But yeah, he shows up at the front door. He starts playing with their Amazon packages, and of course the Corvo merely steadies everybody and tells them that they can handle this. And all they have to do is thank him for the pizza and tip him, and which he does. But then Aisha tells him to tip him, which of course annoys the group a little bit more. But and of course Terry, realizing that 10% is the lowest they can go, they do decide to tip him. But then Aisha tells them that the final part of the test is to give him 5 stars, which of course Corvo is a lot more reluctant to, because as he points out, 5 stars is supposed to mean something. But of course, at this point where Terry points out that obviously empathy isn't so much what you being able to actually empathize with what people are feeling, but doing what's right to make other people feel good, even if they don't necessarily deserve it. But which is a bit of a mixed message on empathy, but I get it. I get the idea that they're going with. That's obviously everybody in town's a jerk, so it's not really surprising that that's a thing. But in case Corvo decides that Terry's right, they vote 5 stars, and then they proceed to be let out of the confinement chamber, and then proceed to use rays to turn people into various things, which does wind up sorting out the jerk population as Parade magazine winds up coming into town. And the chief editor-in-chief from Parade magazine, she takes one look around because all the people have since been turned around into various things, and those that are still around have always been scared shitless. But in case she does comment that this seems like a found town, and does point out that New Gamesport is or rather whatever the town is. I know it's supposed to be something funny, but she does comment that the town they live in would actually be perfect for the top 10 cities to live in. And of course she then compliments the solar opposites on their behavior and everybody around them. But then one guy pisses in the fountain, and Yumilak turns him into coins in front of the editor-in-chief, and she immediately regrets her decision and leaves. So, at which point, Jessie is annoyed about how, after all of that, they didn't even get into the top 10 towns in the world. They screwed up big time, which, of course, annoys her. But of course, at this point where Yumilak points out that ultimately the cover that they went with is a lot better, and notes that the town center, the notes that his thing is on how the town's moral center has saved the town, and also notes that there are 4 chowder recipes, which makes him very happy. Although Jessie just rolls her eyes and is very annoyed about the fact that they didn't even get what they were trying to accomplish in the episode, and that's fair. I mean, I'm pretty sure turning anybody into anything in front of the person who's in charge of that rating, that would obviously be a deal breaker. But of course, the episode does kind of end with a bit of a moral note in that the solar opposites, we thought they were actually just being dicks to everybody else this whole time, turning everybody into things with their ray guns. But as it turns out, everybody was just too shit scared of the solar opposites to be bad people in front of them. And without the solar opposites around, they are in fact allowed to be their true selves, which is evil jerks. But yeah, and also the thing with the wall where Cherie and Halk have since descended into the lower depths of the wall. I'm curious what's going to happen there. But anyways, that's going to do it for my review of Solar Opposites. What do you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks down in my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday. Go check those out. Be sure to go check out my my page. Go check out my Twitter. I post updates over there. I also retweet a lot of stuff, so go check that out. Be sure to just go check out all of my things. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!